Good afternoon, everyone. As you start to log on, thanks for joining us today. We're going to give folks just a few more minutes and let others join before we begin today's discussion. So thanks for joining. In about 2 minutes, we'll get started. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll get started in about 1 minute. Thanks for joining us. Those of you who have already logged on, let us know where you're joining us from in the chat, and we'll get started with the full discussion in about a minute. Someone said chat might be disabled, so all my great thoughts about dropping in where you're coming from might not be happening. So apologies if the chat is disabled. There we go. Looks like some of them coming in now. Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us today for this edition of Post-Secondary Pathways. My name is Dr. Windecker, and I'm the Deputy Director of Higher Education here at the Hunt Institute. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time or who are unfamiliar with the Hunt Institute, we're founded by four-term North Carolina Governor Jim Hunt, and we serve as a resource for policymakers on education issues across the education spectrum through both in-person and virtual convenings, research, and other forms of technical assistance. Before we really dive into this conversation, I want to provide a brief logistics overview and some housekeeping. We'll start with the discussion for about 30 minutes, moderated between myself and the panelists, and then we'll pivot to a Q&A where the audience can submit their questions via the Q&A function of the webinar. If you have any questions throughout the discussion, feel free to continue to submit them through that Q&A feature. We won't be monitoring the chat per se for your questions, so make sure you add those to the Q&A if you want them addressed by panelists. Additionally, we will record this webinar and post it to our YouTube channel for folks to view afterwards. For those of you who are attending the discussion and want to follow along on Twitter, you can use the hashtag postpathways, and you can find us at Hunt Higher Ed on Twitter. But with that, what I really want to do is dive into this conversation. I'm excited to start this three-part webinar series that we're doing in partnership with the Belk Center. The Belk Center for Community College Leadership, a nonprofit organization in North Carolina State University committed to equipping exceptional community college leaders who address urgent needs. Before we get started, I want to pass it over to Grayson Norcross, who's a research associate at the Belk Center, to share a bit about their work. So Grayson, thanks for your partnership, and we'd love to learn a little more.
Thanks so much, Wynn. And thank you all for joining us today. As Wynn mentioned, my name is Grayson Norcross, and I'm filling in today for Dr. Audrey Jager, the Executive Director of the Belk Center for Community College Leadership and Research, as part of North Carolina State University's College of Education. For those of you who don't know AJ, much of her tenure as a faculty member and researcher has focused on improving equitable outcomes for students and faculty members at community colleges. AJ had to address an emergency today and is incredibly disappointed that she is unable to join you all, but looks forward to continuing the conversation on the importance of community colleges. So as Wynn noted, we began our work in 2018, and we were formally designated as a center in 2019. The Belk Center aims to create and distill knowledge into actionable insights, convenes people and organizations together to form actionable partnerships, and serves as a catalyst in equipping leaders to tackle pressing issues. And we achieve these goals through providing research and insights that lead to actionable tools and frameworks grounded in North Carolina's realities. through our leadership development and learning opportunities, such as the President's Academy, the NC Teaching and Learning Hubs, the Rural College Leaders Program, and our annual Dallas Herring Lecture, which, for those of you interested, our Dallas Herring Lecture will take place this November, November 8th. And there is a link to register for the lecture in the chat. So we look forward to seeing you all there as well. But we also achieve these goals by creating a community college leadership pipeline through the doctoral program in community college leadership. And finally, by developing innovative ideas and partnerships in collaboration with community college leaders from North Carolina and across the country. I'm so excited to be here with you all today with so many partners at the Belk Center to talk about the role of community colleges in supporting post-secondary attainment efforts. Community colleges have historically supported students in lifelong learning. The accessibility of community colleges has allowed individuals to engage in coursework, to pursue degrees or credentials, to gain continuing education or reskilling to meet workforce needs. While the role of community colleges has always been integral to their communities, the national focus on post-secondary attainment has highlighted the value of community colleges in increasing the number of individuals with education beyond high school and providing economic mobility. Thanks again for the opportunity to share our work, and I'm looking forward to the rest of this conversation.
Thank you, Grayson. We appreciate it for the partnership and all that you all do at the Belk Center. Just quickly want to echo how great the Dallas Herring Lecture is. So I hope if you've never attended before that you'll register for that and hear about some of those transformative changes happening. But that's enough for our introductions, because I know you're all here to truly hear from the ones that are doing the work on the ground. So I'm excited to introduce our three panelists for today. They all are very esteemed colleagues, so hang with me while we go through their bios, but excited to dive into this. But first, want to introduce Dr. Charlene Dukes, who is President Emerita of Prince George Community College in Maryland. Dr. Dukes accepted the opportunity to serve Prince George County as their 8th and first female president in the beginning of 2007. During her tenure, enrollment surged to 44,000 students, and through innovative partnerships with the public school system, 7 middle and early college programs were established. She is currently chair of the board of Meyer Foundation, secretary of the Greater Washington Community Foundation, vice chair of the board of Care First, Inc., past chair of the board of the American Association of Community Colleges, and a board member of the Belk Center's National Advisory Board. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Dukes. Next,
Thank you for having me.
I did not mean to cut you off. Thanks again for joining us. I appreciate it. Next, we have Dr. Jeff Cox, who has been president of Wilkes Community College for the past 8 years. Prior to that, he spent 20 years in the K-12 system in various roles, including a superintendent of Allegheny County Schools for almost 9 years. In 2018, Dr. Cox led the college in the ambitious goal of increasing Wilkes Community College's graduation rate from 25% to 50% by 2023. To date, Wilkes Community College has increased its graduation rate to 45%. Several student-focused initiatives led by Dr. Cox are attributed to the increased graduation rate. Dr. Cox was also central to the creation of the Wilkes Community College Educational Promise Scholarship, a $9 million+ endowed funds enabling all students in Wilkes, Ashe, and Allegheny College and Allegheny counties to receive an associate's degree tuition free. Dr. Cox serves as the president of North Carolina's Association of Community Colleges. Thanks for joining us today, Dr. Cox. And good gracious, as a North Carolina resident, I should be better on these counties, but we appreciate all you do for your region. Really appreciate it. Last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Avis Proctor, president of William Rainey Harper College in Illinois. Dr. Proctor has more than 25 years of experience advancing the community college mission as an innovative mathematics educator, academic administrator in multiple roles, and as president. She is Harper College's first female and first African-American president. Prior to serving in this role, she spent 19 years at Broward College in Florida. Dr. Proctor's last role at Broward College was president of the North Campus in Coconut Creek. She contributes to the professional discourse on progressive leadership in higher education, research-based instructional strategies, strategic community engagement, economic development, and the STEM pipeline for underrepresented groups. Dr. Proctor is also on the board of directors for the American Association of Community Colleges. Thanks for being here today, Dr. Proctor. Well, one thing is clear. Absolutely. One thing is clear. This is a group of committed and busy leaders. I do not know how you do all that you do, not only for your specific institutions, but all the regional and national work that you do. So we appreciate you all being here today. With that, let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Dr. Duke, we'll come to you first. But post-secondary attainment efforts require an intentional focus both on enrollment and retention methodology to ensure students gain access to higher ed and complete their degree or credential. During your time at Prince George Community College, you've improved the college-going culture of the community, evident by both increases in enrollment and establishment of 7 middle and early college programs. In your experience, what were some evidence-based practices that community college leaders can utilize to improve that college-going culture and to improve access?
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me, Dr. Decker. And it's a pleasure to be with my colleagues here in the room and friends through the Belk Center. What I will say to you is that I've spent just about 42 years in post-secondary education. And during that time, I learned a lot. At the same time, I will tell everyone in this session that I learned probably much more over the last 2 years, 2.5 years of COVID, than maybe I learned all of those 42 years, where we could pivot, where we could change quickly, where we could think aggressively and assertively in ways that we could serve our students, serve the members of our employment community, our employees, and to serve the members of our greater community. But I will tell you, the one thing that has stuck with me through all of this is the need to create a sense of belonging for our students on our campuses. You know, there used to be terminology that we would use that, quite frankly, in hindsight and retrospect, was probably more damaging than we thought. One is we used to talk about students bringing all of this baggage with them. And what I believe is that students bring experiences. And what they're looking for at our institutions is a sense of belonging and a commitment to their dreams and aspirations and goals. And they expect to see that within administration, faculty, staff, and others who make and even the board of trustees who make a commitment to the work that we do, the vision and the mission that we have for our students. So what I always tried to do is I thought about the change in Prince George's County. When I arrived at Prince George's Community College, it was a predominantly white institution. And as the county became more Black and brown, the student body changed with that. And what it meant is that we had to think about things very differently in the early 2000s than we did in the late 1990s. And it was our language, recognizing that 56% of the students were first generation college. So they didn't understand the difference between did you apply for college or did you register for college? For them, those two words meant the same thing. And that, you know, in all of our sort of professional relationships, we have a jargon that we use and we do it very easily, but we don't think about the people to whom we are speaking and their understanding of that. So it was a matter of thinking, what does it mean for a student to belong here? And actually, what does it mean for a student of color to belong here when the institution for so long had been predominantly white? What did we need to change? How could we become student ready, as opposed to thinking that students are coming to us college ready? So even as you spoke about the 7 middle colleges that we were able to establish while I was at Prince George's, it was all because of a need in the community. As our community became more affluent, they were looking for lots of different things within the public school system: transformation, innovation, something different. And the superintendent at the time and I sat down and had a conversation. And what we said is, let's think about this movement that's going on across the country, and specifically in states like California, Texas, New York, this thing called early and middle colleges. And so what Dr. Hyde and I agreed to as part of that dialogue is that we would never talk about money first. What would it cost us to do this? What we would do is our research, and we would talk about the innovation that it would bring to our public schools and the enhanced partnership between the Prince George's County Public School System and Prince George's Community College. So, I've relied a lot on partnerships. I don't believe that we have to do this work alone or be in it by ourselves. There are many nonprofits and for-profits across our communities who are willing to help and willing to support us. So those are the things that I see as essential: a sense of belonging. Do I see other people here who look like me? Do I see the people who are making the decisions? Do they look like me? Do I feel that sense of care and belonging as I walk across the campus or as I sit in classrooms, whether that's face-to-face or virtual? So I'll stop there and then be prepared for any other questions that you might have.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Dukes. That change of mindset from the baggage students might bring to the experiences that they bring in the wealth of knowledge, such critical in the way student affairs professionals and academics really frame their mindset. So thank you for that. A quick follow-up, because I do want to get to the other panelists, so maybe just in 30 seconds or so, but you mentioned this growth into a predominantly Black institution. Specifically, you've seen some success with your Black male students, and we know that specific supports are important. So in just 30 seconds or so, what were some key takeaways that you've seen in your work around particularly Black male students?
To make sure that they have a place and a space in our institution, and that we were not judging those students by whatever we saw happening in the greater population, and recognizing that a student who came on campus, what I always said, if they go through our admissions and registration processes, then what we have to assume is that somewhere in the back of their minds, they understand the value of post-secondary education, degree attainment, credential attainment, and we should be there to nurture that spark.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all that great work. Look forward to continuing this conversation as well. Dr. Cox, I'll come over to you because you were an Aspen Presidential Fellow for the Community College Excellence. And, part of those discussions were really around economic mobility for students and citizens in your area. So as president of Wilkes Community College, can you tell us a little bit about what are some key indicators for work and how you're measuring success in this area?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I finished the Aspen program, my key capstone project was the launch of a new strategic plan for our college. And really the focal point of that was improving the economic mobility of the people in our service area. We had a statistic that two out of three students who are children who grew up in our service area in poverty were likely to stay in poverty for their entire lives. And we kind of use that as a driving point around the strategic plan. So as we start digging into this, of course, one of the first questions we ask of our existing programs, what are the labor market outcomes? How many of our students are graduating and getting into jobs where they can earn a living wage? And sadly, pretty quickly, what we found out was we didn't have very good data around that. A few of our programs, I think of nursing, for example, did have good data. Part of their accreditation process requires them to track the graduates and see, how many are enrolled in a program, in a nursing career, and what kind of salaries are they making. Most of our programs, though, didn't have that, and we were living off of anecdotes, individual stories of success of individual students. But when we really began to take a hard look at what measurable data did we have to support students who graduated from our automotive program, for example, could expect to make X salary when they graduated, what we found was the hard data didn't exist in large measure. So we have begun a process of trying to look at that program by program, and even included this in the program review process when we're talking about the viability of programs. We want to know what's the labor market demand for the program, And then what are the labor market outcomes in terms of salary? What can graduates expect? Another kind of significant issue that popped up in this is, for us, more than half of our students are in the college transfer pathway, planning on going and completing a 4-year degree. But sadly, only about 14 or 15% of those students actually do transfer and complete that 4-year degree within 6 years. So when we started digging into that, we realized the labor market outcomes for those transfer students who had only completed half of that 4-year degree with our 2-year associate degree in college transfer, they really didn't have very good labor market outcomes. There's not a high demand for that half of a 4-year degree. So it caused us to go back and revamp our advising program and putting career coaches in high schools and really being intentional with students on thinking through what career path are they going to go to, and what realistically is a path to the university. If they're going to go get that 4-year degree, what is their plan to get there? And if they don't have a good financial plan on doing that, look at some of our other 2-year programs that do have great labor market outcomes. So we're just trying to be more intentional with how we're advising students.
Yeah, that's amazing work. Really. Oh, muted myself. Sorry about that. Just really great work, both on the data front and then really connecting to the students. So to follow up, though, I'm gonna push a little bit because congratulations, first off, on being recently elected as president of the North Carolina Association of Community College Presidents. That's a huge honor.
Thank you.
You're going to get to scale some of this work up. So you've had success, but we know North Carolina is the 3rd largest community college system in the nation. And it's access, 30 minutes away from someone in North Carolina is the goal of our great 58 colleges. So how are North Carolina's community colleges uniquely positioned for that greater collaboration to support attainment?
Well, when you touched on part of it, our founding fathers of our community college system in North Carolina had a great vision that if higher education were truly going to be accessible to all citizens in North Carolina, proximity mattered. And so we do have, I think, in almost every case across the great state of North Carolina, a community college within at least a 1-hour drive, if not a half an hour, of virtually every citizen. That's about unheard of across the country, is my understanding. So just proximity, just having a place of higher education that's within a short commutable distance is a essential factor that we have. That's in place. Of course, our affordability is unprecedented. For anybody, wherever they are on the socioeconomic ladder, our community college tuition rates are certainly affordable, particularly with Pell. And then, of course, the nature of our institutions are open door, and we like to say we take the top 100% of our citizens and provide them a high quality education. So increasingly, there's an awareness, I think, out in the public and with business and industry that a post-secondary credential doesn't necessarily mean a 4-year degree. In some cases, not even a 2-year degree. We've just launched a new program in IT where we're turning out students in an intensive 12 to 15-week course in a particular niche market in software engineering or IT support. Those graduates are getting out making $45,000 to $75,000 a year, which is a great wage where we live. And they're doing that the first year that they're employed. So I think community colleges are ideally positioned to partner with business and industry, and also with our K-12 partners and the universities to help us meet this post-secondary attainment goal My Future NC has set for us.
Yeah, thank you for that, President Cox. That's great. And you mentioned partnerships. Dr. Dukes mentioned partnerships. I want to bring in Dr. Proctor because we know how critical these roles of community partners, including the neighboring school districts, post-secondary education, nonprofits, businesses, are to that success. So can you tell us more about how these partnerships support students in gaining that access to the workforce, or employees of the workforce in gaining access to the institutions?
Certainly. Thank you for having me here today. And as I listen to my colleagues, I hear a theme that we actually advance here, as well as centering the student, what they bring to the college and how we support them to reach their goals. And so here at Harper, we believe strongly in engaging our community partners, be it the school district, and we think about the student life cycle. And so we have a You Matter, We Care, SOAR framework, and it is centering the student before they come here. And SOAR stands for Search, Onboard, Advance, and Realize. So thinking about that whole journey and what we need to do to be sure that we're not only intentional, but strategic with the supports along the way, so that students can actually ultimately realize their goal, not only of earning a credential, but also getting either transferring or entering the workplace. So as I think about the Northwest Educational Council for Student Success, here in Illinois, we have 3 high school sender districts. And so I meet with the area superintendents and we talk about transitions for students. We look at the data. We have a strong promise program that was established prior to my arrival that students can earn up to 60 credits once they meet certain criteria and they sign up as freshmen in high school. 8th graders, we do the orientation. So they're making plans early on in terms of how they can possibly engage and come to us and earn up to 60 credits towards whatever path it is that they choose. And then on the other side of that, we have our university center where we partner with both public and private universities for those who want to pursue a bachelor program. And you talk about geography, Dr. Cox, right here on our campus, those who've already navigated coming to Harper can continue. Certainly with the pandemic now, there's an online element there, but it was designed for them to have access right here on campus to pursue bachelor programs. And so I can think of a student story at our Grad Fest this past May, where the father was in our university center, his wife, they were both Harper grads, the daughter was in Promise. And so it's not only impacting that individual student, but it's also their families, and it's a generational impact that we're having in the community. And then from the business standpoint, right down the street, we have Zurich. That's our largest apprenticeship partnership. And we've expanded that into the healthcare arena as well. As you can imagine with the pandemic, there are higher needs with our healthcare partners, and they're looking to upskill their employees and also attract others to get into the different fields that they need to fill. And so through our Zurich partnership, we actually have an earn and learn program. They've committed to another 100 apprentices because it's working well. And we have 9 registered apprenticeships through our Workforce Solutions division. And we are now customizing those too as well in terms of the healthcare arena. So it's critical to our success. And when I mean our success is really our students. If we're doing and fulfilling or doing what we're supposed to do and fulfilling our mission, then our students feel it, our community actually benefits from those partnerships. And last but not least, I think it's a segment that sometimes gets missed, are nonprofits in the area. So I think about the school district, the universities, our business community, and really tailoring programs and being responsive to the regional employees, but nonprofits play a role too. We have a significant influx of immigrants right now. Recent data shows we have Ukrainian students, Venezuelan students coming in. And so how are we supporting them and building community for them to figure out how they can now in this new space, in this new environment, advance themselves and be contributing members of our community. And so we launched, thankfully, due to a large philanthropic gift, we were able to launch not only a tuition fees and book scholarship for underrepresented or low-income students in high demand, high fields, but we were also able to connect with our community, establish a community innovation fund grant program. And this year we awarded $100,000 to different nonprofits that focused on economic mobility, equity, and diversity in our community and that transition for those individuals. So it's a holistic approach, but again, centering our students and looking at the student life cycle.
Thank you for that, Dr. Proctor. Yes, the centering the student portion, but also just the width of some of these partnerships to ensure that those holistic supports exist. As a follow-up question for you, and I'm gonna probably loop in one of these questions from the attendees, but you've got a lot of experience on the plethora of statewide engagement experiences, you know, one of them being the Early Childhood Education Consortium for Equity to the Illinois Board of Higher Education Strategic Plans. So what takeaways would you want to share about greater alignment across the state? And maybe with this, in terms of alignment, someone asked about, we know early childhood education is a low wage, but a high needs area. So further, how do you make this alignment happen with the jobs that are needed versus, you know, the wages and what people are asking for in the careers that they're hoping to pursue?
So I'll start with the low wage piece, right? That we know there's some programs that we have to offer because childcare, for example, is essential, right? So how do you ladder those opportunities so they can enter perhaps at that childcare provider level, but then have other credentials that they can earn to be directors of centers and things of that nature. And so it was a priority at our state level here in Illinois. We have Senator Pacione-Zayas. She talks about having the workforce behind the workforce. We witnessed in the pandemic that parents were challenged in schooling their children at home, yet having to fulfill their job responsibilities and those who were without. I mean, there were a lot of dynamics that they were facing. And so we felt it was a priority. The governor here also, Governor Pritzker, felt it was a priority to invest in early childhood education. And we're working with our universities. So we're looking at laddering the access to full scholarships covering the cost of education for those individuals. And then making sure that the childcare that's essential for our workforce in our community is available. So that's just starting this semester, believe it or not, and we're looking forward to see where that goes. But big picture wise, connecting policy at the state level, engaging elected officials to advocate for to advance the needs and make them aware of the needs of our students, I think it's critical so that we can get the resources and support for our students in our community.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. And I know we look forward to seeing the results of those programs. In particular, it sounds like one of the newer ones we've seen around ECE. So we're looking forward to seeing scalability and where things go. Got one more just general question for the panelists before we get to the full Q&A, but want to remind audience members to please submit any questions. I see some great ones coming in so far, but any questions you have, go ahead and submit those in the Q&A function. Question for the three of you, and I think we'll just go in the order we just went in for introduction questions, but as education leaders, you know, what policy, if passed, if alleviated, do you think could revolutionize higher education pathways to better serve students? So if you had that magic wand, how are you revolutionizing higher education pathways to serve students better? Dr. Dukes, we'll come to you first.
So I think that there are a couple of things, and we started with the recent announcement with regard to student debt. It's a first start. I don't think it should be the end. I think that we should be looking at things like the Parent Plus loan. It is amazing to me how you can have a family that has an income of about $36,000 a year, but because their child is in college at an institution of choice, that the Parent Plus loan is $24,000. So there's something wrong with the formula that results in that. I make $36,000 a year, and my son, my child has a $24,000 now Parent Plus loan that I've got to worry about. How are we going to pay that? So I think that as we continue to look at things like student debt and whatnot, Again, I think we are at the beginning of it. We are certainly not at the end. I also believe that we need to be thinking about what would a common course numbering system look like across the United States. We are we call ourselves the free world, and in many ways we are behind other countries in terms of transfers from community colleges to four-year institutions, because there's way too much choice and decisions around whether English 101 at community colleges is comparable to English 101 within the four-year sector. That alone, the inability to transfer credits stops a number of students in their track, and it also adds to the discussion in my mind about the value of higher education. I believe it's valuable because I know what it's done for my family and my brothers and sisters. And I want that same value to be there for other families, other students. I had a few more. I think that, again, transfer policies. And then I think, again, policies around rising tuition rates. It goes back to the cost of education, but we need to really delve deeply into the fact that education is so unaffordable for so many people across this country. And so what they do is nothing. I think it's admirable what we've tried to do in our own institutions regarding having scholarship programs, working with for-profit and nonprofit to be able to get students through. But it is a bigger issue because that only touches the surface of what we need to do to ensure that education is affordable for anyone who chooses to pursue it.
Thank you for that, Dr. Dukes. Really appreciate it. One of the things you mentioned was Parent Plus loan, personal experience, something I'm dealing with as well. Do want to just know in some of the recent moves by the Education Department, they put out a waiver to consolidate all your loans into one, which includes an opportunity to bring Parent Plus loans possibly in off of your parents. And so as someone like myself who had two sisters that went to school after me, Parent Plus loan was an important thing for me, but now it continues to weigh my parents down. And so thinking about how to get out from under some of that debt. So thank you for just acknowledging what students are working through with that, Dr. Dukes. Dr. Cox, we'll come to you next, but you had that magic wand. How are you revolutionizing higher education pathways?
Well, a couple of things that I would point out that I think could be important. I would echo what Dr. Dukes has outlined around the transfer. That's fertile ground for some policy changes within states, across the states, across the levels from K-12 to community college to the university. I encountered this in a personal way with my son's now wife, then girlfriend, as she was trying to transfer from our early college into a nursing program. And she's a first generation college student. So I was taking her, my wife and I, around the various universities. And what we found was, even though she had completed our early college program, had her 2-year associate degree in college transfer, all the nursing programs had different prerequisites. All the state sponsored university nursing programs had different sets of prerequisites. So where she was going to be able to get in and complete at one university in 3 years, another she could finish in 2.5 years. And it led me to begin to dig deeper into this issue. And what I found is for our early college, high school students in particular, they not only need to know what they're going to major in at the university on almost day one when they enter as freshmen, at least by their sophomore year in high school, they need to know what they're going to major in at the university and which university they're going to attend. If they don't know both of those things, their chances of being able to complete 2 years and within 2 years after completing our two-year associate degree are next to zero. So policy work around coordinating at the university level in a place like nursing would be a great place to start. All the nursing students are going to have to pass the NCLEX to become nurses here in North Carolina. So why wouldn't we make uniform what those courses are from the university down through the community college and even into high school? for those students to be taken, so that it wouldn't matter and you wouldn't have to know which particular university you're going to attend. So that's one piece of it that, again, there are too many decisions, in my view, that are left to individual deans of a department at a particular university on whether they're going to accept our courses for credit or whether they're just going to be electives, and whether students have to take it with them or with us. So I think we could do a lot of work around that to streamline the experience for our students. So that's one area. Second one I want to just mention is the federal Pell Grant program and opening that up for our workforce and continuing education students. Right now, if you're doing a short-term credential, you're not able to utilize those Pell Grant funds. And for what I'm seeing in our area, there are a lot of employers, and I mentioned the IT example. There are a lot of employers who are more interested in students who really have the specific knowledge or skill more than a 4-year degree or a 2-year degree. They just want to know, can you code? If you can code, we don't care what your degree is. You can write the code or you can't write the code. If you can write it, we'll hire you. So a short-term credential could be just what a student needs to get out and go into and start earning a living wage. And once they're doing that, the world opens up for them, and those employers are going to support students continuing their education and getting stackable credentials, maybe eventually leading to a 2-year or 4-year degree or beyond. But it gets their foot in the door and gets a student out of poverty and into a living wage job. For a lot of students, that could become a lot more accessible if they could utilize the Pell Grant funds for those workforce programs.
Yeah, that's great, Dr. Cox. We're tracking Pell Grant stuff, and I think you might have froze. So if you did drop out, we'll make sure to get you back in. But in terms of the Pell Grant stuff, yeah, we were tracking on the federal level, thought we might see it come through. Obviously didn't make it through, but we haven't lost a hope for that either. But yeah, just thank you for that work. And I think the other part is almost not necessarily a challenge for our businesses out there, but maybe to think through why you have the education requirements that you do on certain job postings. Is there, a bachelor's degree really necessary for that? Or are there certain credentials? Because that all contributes to this conversation. So thanks for that. Dr. Proctor, I want to come to you before we open it up to the audience Q&A, but magic wand, how are you fixing post-secondary pathways, making them more accessible?
So I think about how we have centered equity in our work, and equity gaps is a focus of ours, and we're committed to cutting into those gaps. We've been talking about closing gaps for decades, and we're, think about all those students who've come to college and have left without a credential. So there are a lot of lost credits out there. So re-incentivizing individuals to come back and complete the short-term lens, I agree. Our non-credit side of the house, there are individuals there that are getting skills that we've not necessarily captured and said that knowledge is equivalent to this side on the credit side. And so that non-credit to credit policy work, I think, is necessary. But in terms of just the bigger picture, the equity gaps, who's in what programs, who's finishing, who's not finishing, and how are we going to really execute focused solutions that are going to close those gaps and get more success for our students as they move through our curriculum. And so 3 pillars of equity we've been committed to: removing barriers, closing equity gaps, and executing focused solutions. And so if we know what works, similar to some work that I did in Florida with a re-enrollment campaign, it's actually partnering with University of Florida faculty member there and a former chancellor for the community colleges there in Florida, Willis Holcomb. We were able to show that a re-enrollment campaign, nudging them with text and incentivizing with a tuition waiver, actually gave individuals hope to come back and complete. So we want to get them to complete, but also at higher levels for all students.
Dr. Proctor, what was that third pillar, executing success strategies?
Focused solutions, because our students come to us with different experiences, as we said here. So what will work and support this need. Transportation solutions, for example, is an access to campus is one that we're deploying 3 versions of that in support of students this fall. So I think it's important for us to think about who's finishing, who's not, and how do we get more success and incentivizing institutions and policymakers to give us the resources to achieve that goal.
Absolutely. Well, and as a public administrator, I just love that executing portion, because so often we're talking about the new innovative policy, but sometimes it's just getting on the ground and actually executing what we know works. So that's great to hear. I'm going to go to a couple of the Q&As that have came in. So Dr. Dukes, I think I'll come to you first, and then Dr. Cox, I'm going to bring the follow-up question to you. But Dr. Dukes, one of the questions that was asked was around supporting transfer students. And, it came up with Dr. Cox a little bit, but how are you all working to make sure a student is successful in that pathway if it's a transfer?
Well, it's working with our transfer partners too, that as students transfer, recognizing that their experiences are the experiences they bring to that institution are going to be different than what a native student would have. That it is likely their first time coming into a residential hall kind of experience. It's navigating the services that exist for them. It's making sure that those services are available when students need them, not when we have our own internal schedule about when we want to work. Most transfer students are working a minimum of 30 hours a week in order to make ends meet for their families and, as they pursue their post-secondary education. So how do we help our 4-year partners understand the cultures from which those students are coming, and how they can, how some of the things that we've done can be inculcated into that 4-year environment. I think, special offices where students can go, the office for transfer students, and folks who can help to navigate, advise, move them in the right direction and stay with them as those kinds of things happen, because they have to create a similar sense of belonging for transfer students.
Yeah, that's great. I really appreciate that. That sense of belonging portion. And you mentioned the working 30 hours a week. And we know that working more than 15 hours a week adds stress and actually hurts the academic process. And so thinking through what that means for affordability. And so I guess that's my follow-up for you, Dr. Cox, is we've talked about transfer. We also know there's some amazing degrees specifically to the community college. As we're creating, these dual pathways, how are we supporting both types of students on our campus? Those that may be looking to transfer, as well as those that are coming there for that specific degree or credential.
Well, one thing, Wynn, is just telling students the truth, up front, just being very honest about, here are the different options you have. Many students just, they've been told that they need to go to the university, and they just come in, they don't know what they want to study, they don't know what they want to be, what they want to do career-wise, and so they just get in college transfer, and then they do that and go along through that for 2 years, and then realize they really are maybe no closer to a career path than they were when they got here. So we've revised our whole advising model to make all of our advisors academic success instructors. So they're split their time, half time as instructors. So they're the first, one of the first courses the students take is this college success course. That person ends up being their advisor through the duration. So the whole time they're here, that person sticks with them as advisor. And then the faculty members layer on as mentors that are in career specific areas. But doing that's allowed us to really be able to track those students relationally. So they've got their person on campus from the time they get here until they leave. If it's 2 years, 3 years, however long their journey is, and that person gets to know the student and knows what their needs are. They can have these ongoing conversations about what does it mean to go to the university. You can come here for $2,500 a year tuition and fees. Your Pell Grant for $6,000 is going to cover all that. But when you transfer to university, it's going to be $20,000 or $25,000 a year. What's your plan for that? Are you prepared to, are you saving money now? Are you planning on getting loans? Are you going to work? Just having those conversations so that it doesn't just hit students in the head when they're ready to transfer and they think, I don't have any plan. I've got no financial means to do this. And so they're done. So trying to be more proactive on the front end and engaging students in that dialogue. And if they don't really have a realistic plan to go to university, here are a half dozen great programs that we have, or 12 or 15 or however many. What are you interested in? And maybe we have a 2-year program that can get you in a career where you can make a living wage and then go back and get that 4-year degree as an adult if you want to, when you can afford to pay for it. So just having really honest conversations about where the good options are, which one fits the particular student is what we're trying to do, Win.
That's great, President Cox. Those honest, transparent conversations and the advising. And ultimately, I mean, that's what we're hearing from students is they want that honest conversation. They're tired of the charades, the navigating through it all, to be able to sit down and have those types of conversations. So I appreciate that. I know we're getting close on time. I'm going to come to you in just a second. Dr. Proctor had several questions about adult learners, particularly in North Carolina. Just want to name that in January, we are going to do a webinar as part of this series it's going to focus specifically on Reconnect students and the work North Carolina's done to support adult learners. So I hope you'll come back to that one. We're not going to be able to get to some of those questions. Julia is dropping some of those resources related to that. But kind of on that end, Dr. Proctor, I think what I want to ask you about, you've talked a lot about these partnerships, and lots has come up about, how do we work with off-campus organizations like those nonprofits that you've mentioned? How do we support students by bringing in those organizations to the campus? How do we make those connections? What do leaders need to do on campus to make those?
So I would say make it inescapable, right? And so our mental health support services that we offer, legal aid that we offer for students who may be undocumented, making sure that they're aware of those services and they can use them on campus. Sometimes, again, geography is a barrier, and so that having those resources on campus or near a campus and connecting with those organizations to understand how students are going through their organizations. And oftentimes we have the same clientele, the same folks going to them for service and coming to us for education, and how we can make that a more holistic approach. And then, of course, being in the community ourselves. I took my cabinet 2 summers ago into the community to see what our students were experiencing. And we have one of our community partners for our communities is their name, POC. And they have an entourage of services in one location in that community. We're able to see what individuals are navigating. Sometimes it's needing to start at language acquisition, just to be able to communicate and then navigate through that non-credit to the credit side of the house. I think about, from the transfer perspective, having the advisors from the university on campus, again, making it inescapable so that they can get the actual picture early on, and making sure that they're assigned an advisor, they're mapping out an educational plan. We require that of our students early on. That first semester, we'd like them to do that, and so that they could see long-term what those time and financial commitments would be. And then using our foundation, we have some donors that have realized that all of the supports at the community college level we provided has gotten them to a great space. But what about the transfer? So now we have donors that are actually contributing to that transfer space so that it's reducing costs for students there. And so I think we need to think again through that whole student life cycle and be sure that we have intentional supports along the way.
Yeah, those intentional supports along the way. I really appreciate it. This has been an awesome conversation. So many great questions have came in. There's no chance we're going to get to them all. I know we're running short on time. I want to give each of the panelists just 30 seconds. What is something that we have not talked about today that you want to bring to this discussion? Either it's a passion project or we just didn't hit on it today. I know there's a lot out there, so we'll just go in that same order, but let's keep it at 30 seconds as we finish this out. Dr. Dukes, what's one thing you wanted to mention that we haven't gotten to today?
Oh my gosh, there's so much, but I would just think about it from the perspective of how do we see higher education and particularly our community colleges evolving over these next years? What lessons did we learn from the pandemic? And how do we certainly keep those alive that really worked well and consider those that didn't and maybe take a different approach? But the expectations of higher education are going to be different. The expectations of students will be different. And actually the expectations of our employees and their workplaces will be different. So I would suggest that that's certainly worth a conversation in the future.
Yeah, that's great. We had someone describe those best practices as COVID keepers. What are the keepers that coming out of it? So really appreciate that. Dr. Cox, 30 seconds, something for you.
Yeah, well, and I guess what I would say is, as we launched our strategic plan, one of the real pearls of wisdom I got from Bob Templin in the Aspen program was, a average leader will look at the resources he has and thinks, what can I do within this budget to make a change? An exceptional leader will look at what changes need to happen and then go find the resources to do it. And so that I've been in leadership for 20 some years, but I'd never really thought of it that way. Flipping that switch for us meant launching a strategic plan and then going out and finding what would ultimately be multiple millions of dollars to support a lot of different initiatives that if we had waited till we had the money to do, we never would have done. So think boldly about what needs to happen and then go find the money to make it happen. There are places and partners out there that will help you.
That's great. Shooting for the moon. Well, I like to say shooting for the moon and you might land in the stars. People argue with me. They say the stars are a little further out than the moon. But yeah, just going to find those resources because there are people on and want to help that may not know how they can put their resources in it. So bringing them those ideas is such a great way to engage them. Dr. Proctor, I'll let you finish this out. 30 seconds.
I'll say what I didn't hear come up, and I know we're all facing our enrollment challenges and articulating our value. We know what we offer and how it transforms lives and families and generations. And so making sure that we are engaging with our organizations in the community, be it the employers. I think about different companies that are circumventing the academy, right? They're offering the trainings and really we need to partner with them and make sure that we think through the quality of what those individuals are getting and advancing them forward. And so articulating our value, recognizing if we don't shift in terms of how we function and think differently about how we offer what we offer, there's some hard decisions that will come along the way. And so I think that's a piece that traditionalists have a hard time accepting, but it's here. And so we have to really think about how we're going to continue to demonstrate our value to our communities.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. We will have to continue to demonstrate that value. Well, this conversation demonstrated the value that the three of you bring to the community college space. Personally, I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. This is, a special interest area of mine. So thank you so much for all the work and all the lessons you've been able to provide today. Before closing this discussion, just want to share the next two webinars in this partnered series. The next one will be in a few months on Thursday, October 13th at 2 p.m. Eastern. We'll be discussing how community colleges act as engines for equity and improving access to post-secondary ed, and saw some conversations in the chat about including students that are differently abled in that discussion about equity. So I'm excited to dive into that some. And then our final session will be on Tuesday, January 31st at 2 p.m. Eastern. Again, this is going to be on that focus for North Carolina's efforts to re-engage adult learners. So we hope that you'll join us for both of those. You can register for all these with the links that were in the chat. You can also find us on the Hunt Institute website, and we're available via email or social media as well. Again, thank you for joining us today. Panelists, thank you for this great discussion, and audience, thanks for taking your time to be here. Goodbye all.